So this is Center Update with Dr. Gary, an opportunity for me to share a bit about what happens behind the scenes, things that aren't necessarily apparent via our community announcements. So today I want to share about a milestone that we reached together as a community. First of all, we've been talking about our evolutionary process moving out of a minister-centric ministry practice into mission-centric ministry. The reason is that currently in congregational ministry, 9 out of 10 churches are in decline, and so it makes sense that we be proactive and move into a different ministry practice that is more sustainable. But suffice to say, we need to kind of understand the dynamics that we're having to work with. In any church dynamic, regardless of practice, whether mission-centric or mission-centric, there are typically 3 congregations or 3 distinct cultures that make up the whole. So Congregation A is the relationship that is formed by the ministers and the Board of Trustees. This is a unique culture. It's different than any other culture within the church, although this culture is a part of the greater whole. Then there's Congregation B, could be described as the 20% of our community that provide 80% of the resources in our ministry. And then there's Congregation C, which is the majority of our folks, the 80%, but their effort amounts to about 20% of what is needed. And this describes the 80-20% rule, Pareto's principle. And so in any dynamic, you have a small group that outperforms the whole, and so it's important for us to keep that in mind. Associated with this particular cultural dynamic, Congregation C, is a phenomenon, and that phenomenon every church has. It's called the Revolving Door. And so what this means is that everybody who's coming into the church new is in a culture of receivership, and those who are in the 20% that provide 80% of the resources, they're in the culture of ownership. So it makes sense to understand that if one is in this experience of just coming and checking this out, that there is a trend associated with this group, and that is 90% within 1 year in Congregation C moves on unless they upgrade, unless they become a part of the culture of ownership. And so this is important because if we have a small group of folks that provide 80% of the resources, it's important to know that 20% lives in the demographic of our aging population. And so what that means is that the traditionals and the baby boomers, as they age out, that 20% ceases to provide the 80% of what's needed. It dwindles to 70, to 60, and so on and so forth. So it's incumbent upon us to understand this phenomenon and to reach out and consider other possibilities. And so we are in the process, bless you, as mission-centric ministry, it's a different funding approach. In minister-centric ministry, we're funded by you feeling spiritually fed and giving into that desire to give back. And while this has been the tradition in most congregational ministries, 9 out of 10 churches are now in decline because of this tradition. In other words, it's the contributions aren't measuring up to the actual expenses of churches. So the spiritual cooperative is an idea that's based upon if everyone was doing what they can do, a portion of what is needed for the whole, then we could sustain this ministry out of the effort for each of us to participate in a spiritual cooperative. And so what that means is that each year we need to take ownership of how we're doing with respect to mattering and with respect to the sustainability of this organization. So we have a practice every year at this time around our annual town hall meeting and annual meeting to hold up the mirror, to share how we're doing with respect to our financial state. Where are we in the effort to 100% underwrite our operational expenses via automatic giving? And we started this a couple of years ago, and so this year our need from the community in terms of what we want to own, what we want to 100% underwrite, is $240,000 and change. And there's 160 of us, and if we divide 160 into that figure, it comes out to about $125 a month per person. Now, not everybody can afford that. We need to acknowledge this, but we need to acknowledge at the same time that this is our reality. And as we work to move the needles, we need to understand kind of what it is that's important for us to track so we can see how we're doing and see if our our theory, if the spiritual cooperative idea is actually working. Is it actually moving the needles? So there are three things that we track, three things that we measure. We measure the amount of individuals and families that are involved in some form of automatic giving, because this is the most reliable way in which we can count on the support that's needed. We also measure what percentage of the operational expenses does that group, the community of automatic givers, offset with respect to our operational goal of 100% funding our operations. And then we also track how many individuals are meeting or exceeding the cooperative share, which is last year was $118, and this year is $125. Now last year we had 200 individuals participating financially. This last year, or the year before last, this last year we have 160. So we are also a part of the phenomenon of decline insofar as the numbers. But the interesting thing is that with less numbers, we've outperformed however we've done in years past. And so look at this. So last year, we had 76% of our community involved in some form of automatic giving, which is through the Tidely app, through automatic bill pay, through giving us your credit card to debit, or the religious writing of checks. And so we count what percentage of our congregation. Last year we had 200, and so 76%. And that effort of that community of automatic givers produced 68% of what was needed for us to underwrite the expenses of the church. And last year was $283,000. And so also in 2019, only 29% of our folks could meet or exceed the spiritual cooperative share, which was $118 at the time. So this is not an easy thing. But when we recognize that everybody of different means, if we all consider our capacity to own together, we can do it. It's just that we have to shift into doing what we can do, as opposed to doing necessarily what we're doing. So this year, the exciting thing is that we've increased all of those percentages. We now have 81% of our community involved in some form of automatic giving. We have we now meet 73% of our operational expenses, so we're really close to really owning the whole thing. The exciting thing is that we have now 39% of our community meeting or exceeding the spiritual cooperative share. So finally, I'm going to land on, just for your consideration, our effort is to move the needles. We're not asking anybody to give anymore. We're asking us to be more intentional about how each of us is in our relationship to the church. So if you can, and this is the interesting thing, about 15% more of our community is almost ready to meet or exceed that spiritual cooperative share. So for many, it's just a matter of revisiting and aligning your effort with our goals. And if you're not involved in some form of automatic giving, to go ahead and do that, because that makes a difference for us. And if you have provided us with your credit card, to shift to your own automatic bill pay, so it would save us thousands of dollars. So anyway, that's the sharing that I wanted to make. And I believe, Jim, this has been the first year that we've been in the black in a long, 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 long time. And it's because we have shifted the energy, and we're now a spiritual cooperative. And it's working. And congratulations, we're making a difference in the New Thought movement.